Pre-season is upon us. Arsenal have lost. The Twitter meltdown is very real. Welcome to Lead Judges TV, people. Yes, people, welcome. I'm your host, Dan Potts, as ever. I'm not joined with Lee tonight. Lee is out and about doing other things much more important than his own YouTube channel. Can you believe it? So you're stuck with me. But I have got two fantastic boys and great guests and real true Gooners and friends as well. Mr. Harry Symeou, first of all, from Chronicles of a Gooner and the same old Arsenal podcast colleague. Harry, how you doing, bro?
Yeah, good, man. Feels like we haven't argued about Granit Xhaka for ages. I'm starting to get withdrawal symptoms. We've got to get a few more in before he leaves and we can't do it anymore.
Yeah, we've got to try and make it kind of last as long as we can, ain't we? Try and stretch it out a bit. Do you know what I mean? But good to have you on, bro. It's been a while. It seems like forever, to be honest. So great to have you back.
No, great to be back, man. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good lad. And of course, if I have to have an argument with Harry, then I have to bring someone else on to argue with. And of course, there's no one better than Mr. Tom Canton from Laguna Talk TV. How you doing, Tom?
Yeah, good. Cheers, mate. And thanks for having me on. Absolute pleasure, as always, to jump on for a chat. And Harry as well, always.
Good stuff. Boys, we've got to get straight into it. England is kind of finished. Euros is done. I think everyone's spoken to death the last couple of days about it. I'm not going to ask your opinions on that one, but I am going to ask your opinions on Arsenal. It seems that pre-season is upon us now. The Hibs game has literally just finished. And be patient. Be patient. That's all we keep being told. Be patient. Signings will happen. We've signed Nuno Tavares. It doesn't look like anyone has left yet, apart from Matteo Guendouzi. Looks to have gone to Marseille. Harry, should we be panicking, or is it still time for us to just be a little bit patient?
What are we being patient about here? The transfers or the match? Because first of all, I cannot understand how people get so worked up about pre-season friendlies, especially the first few, which are essentially fitness exercises. That's what they are. With regards to the transfers, I'm not panicking either. You know, the Euros only finished on Sunday. I think, you know, a lot of the time that does have an impact when you're talking about transfer windows with major tournaments. You get players who are involved. You get players wanting to go on their holidays. Quite often you get players maybe cutting those holidays a little bit short after to get deals done, etc. But I'm not overly stressed about it now. If you ask me this question in 2 weeks' time and we're still in the same position, then I'd probably answer it a little bit differently. But I think, you know, the whole let's be patient thing, you know, I understand why some people have had enough of it. But, I mean, nobody's really done that much significant business yet. You know, Man United haven't even confirmed the signing of Sancho properly yet. That saga's been rumbling on for over a year. So other than that, you know, there's not been a lot of significant movement. And I'm looking at the rest of the market and it's making me feel a little bit more relaxed.
And do you think, Harry, like, what is this pre-season about as far as we're concerned? Is it about, I mean, for the first game today, take, for example, most of those players, I mean, I didn't watch all the game, but most of those players ain't going to be Arsenal players much longer. So are they just on show to try and give them fitness to get them sold, do you think, or what?
Honestly, I don't know. There was a few players there that I looked at and, you know, I'm not necessarily sure they'll be at the club or they'll be in the squad at the start of the season. And, you know, you could say that for so many names that were involved. But at this moment in time, it's just about getting minutes under people's belts. That's what it's about at this moment in time. You know, we saw him start the game with what looked like a bit of a 4-4-2. Which is something we haven't seen that often from Mikel Arteta. So there was different sort of shapes, different systems, different players being tried out. Arthur Okonkwo got a go in goal. You know, some unfamiliar faces were on show. It's hard to make anything of these kind of fixtures. I've got to be honest, I don't read into them in terms of what it means for the transfer activity or in terms of what it means for how we might line up, how we might look to play next season. As I said, for me, it's just a fitness exercise.
Fair play. Tom, let's come to you. What do you make of this pre-season or pre-season as a whole? Do you share the opinion of Harry that it's all about fitness and trying to look at who's in and who's out, or is there more to it than that?
Oh, Arteta out, mate. No, I can't really say much more than what Harry said there. To be honest, I expected the meltdown as soon as we saw the first couple of goals come out. I mean, I was doing a live watch along during the show, and whilst we weren't really talking about the game because there wasn't too much going on to talk about, the chat box was lighting up at times with people really not happy with what was going on the pitch. But I mean, as Harry said, it is purely a fitness exercise. It means nothing in regards to anything competitively, like for a performance, as an indicator of anything regards to how we might perform during the season. Of course, immediately some people might draw comparisons and say, will this now force them into making any acceleration of transfer plans? The answer to that is no. It won't change any of their transfer plans. It won't accelerate anything in regards to talks with teams or clubs or players. It's going to continue as if the game never even happened. And it's all it is a good run out for the guys. I mean, when you think about how you prepare for, say, a Premier League game, and then you try and think of the differences between that and what this game would have been. I mean, for a Premier League game, you prep in regards to your system, your starting 11, you analyse the opposition's squad, their team, how they play, their coaching, their subs. Everything like that is prepped and ready. For a pre-season game, I'd be willing to bet a fair chunk of money that they never even looked at the Hibs squads, like their history of games, their form, who's playing, because you can barely ever predict who's going to start in a pre-season game anyway. And so they've just chucked on 11 players. They've probably worked on a few drills, but as Harry said, they've come back into pre-season, and the main thing isn't about working on tactics or systems. It's going to be all about fitness and getting people match fit. I mean, I didn't think they looked anywhere close to match fitness, most of the players on the pitch. I think there were a lot of people really struggling, to be honest. So it is going to take a while to go up to fitness. And I wouldn't be surprised if we lost again against Rangers. And that, again, isn't going to mean anything.
Just a quick one, Dan. There's someone in the comments saying that, Harry, what is there to be relaxed about? We've just lost to a side in the Scottish Second Division. Scottish Second Division, they finished third in the SPL last season. What a pity. Like, this is the kind of crap that goes around and gets recycled by people that don't have a clue what they're talking about. Sorry, mate, but you've just completely made that up. Hibernian are not in the Scottish Second Division. And that's the type of comment that sparks people into overreacting, and it's just not necessary.
Well, Scunny's in the chat. Shout out to Scunny as well. It's pre-season, first game for some of these players since the end of the last one. No need to go batshit. Listen, I do have slight worries and concerns, but not because of this game. I have slight worries and concerns that are massive and go much further than this game. Because as you both know, I'm not a huge fan of the manager. I don't have much faith in him, like the two of you have a lot more faith than me, I should say. I don't like the owner. I think we've got much bigger problems than losing to Hibs in a pre-season game. But somebody put something in the chat which was a good let's see if I can find it. It was about buying players. Here we go. Julian Salmon has said, Dan, you say you won't be Arsenal players much longer, but surely you first need buyers. Harry, let's come to you on this one, because there hasn't been much activity in the transfer window, and that, as you said, is kind of relaxing you a bit more, because, I mean, I say Leicester and Man United had looked to have got some of their targets tied up-ish already, but everyone else has been pretty cute. What impact is the pandemic going to have on this is my first question. And do you feel that we're going to actually be able to sell our players for sort of respectful prices, or is it going to be going on the cheap?
Well, I done a podcast about a month ago where I went through all the players that I thought Arsenal were going to look to move on this summer, and I put the prices I thought we could obtain for them. And I was literally given so much stick about it, because I put Matteo Guendouzi 10 to 12 million pounds, Hector Bellerin 15 million pounds. It doesn't even look like we're going to get that now, and a number of others, because we can talk about the impact of the pandemic, and there has been an impact. There's no getting away from that. But that impact overseas is even bigger. The French clubs that we're looking to shift some of our players onto don't have the money. The Spanish clubs that we would look to move some players onto, the Italian clubs, they don't have the money. They're even more they're in an even worse financial position. And so unless another Premier League club comes in, I think it was always unrealistic to expect that we were going to get good money for some of these players. It's the other thing you got to take into consideration, right? Putting the pandemic aside, is if everybody and their dog knows that you want to get rid of someone because you don't value them and you don't see them as part of the plans moving forward, who at this stage in the transfer window with still a month and a half to go is going to come in and offer you top dollar or the price that you feel you should be getting. Negotiations never work like that. They're going to start low. They're going to try and take the piss, and they're going to try and push their luck. And why wouldn't you if you were that team in that position? We're talking about moving on players that all of us as fans can agree are not good enough, aren't necessarily going to make it at Arsenal Football Club. And so it's clear that when you want rid of someone, it's not going to be easy to persuade somebody else to pay top whack for them. So I expected this. I've got to be honest.
I mean, I do get frustrated with some of our transfer plans. It's like we haven't learned. Like, for example, let's take Maitland-Niles, right? Tom, I'll come to you on this one. You got Maitland-Niles, right, who was apparently off to Wolves in the summer for 15 to 20 million pounds. We rejected it, which at the time I was happy with because I thought he had a place in the squad, right? So I thought, let's give him a go. Wasn't used, mismanaged, gone on loan to West Brom. They got relegated. We'll probably end up selling him now for 8 million pounds, which is very similar to what we did with Kieran Gibbs to West Brom a few seasons ago, wasn't it? Where they offered like 15 million and then in the end he went for about 7 or something like that. I don't know the numbers, but you get my point. Guendouzi, I think people were sniffing around him saying, cool, he could be 30, 40 million pounds. We got about 8 million for him. Like, is this good business, or is this the pandemic, or is this just kind of Arsenal Football Club over and over again?
Look, I mean, historically, Arsenal over the last decade, slightly longer than that, have been really poor with their sales. I mean, it's recruitment in general, not just in terms of how much they're selling players for, but the types of players they're bringing in and the money they were paying for those players. You look at how much we pay for Skodra Mustafi, it's just an example. And then you look at players and how we sold players on and how we're now struggling to, say, get the market value for certain players this summer. You asked me, is it down to the pandemic? There is obviously, as Harry's highlighted some of his points there, yes, the pandemic is going to affect how much we can sell players for, because if you're looking at our team, the only players within that team that the Premier League clubs are going to want to go for are the ones that we want to keep. You're Emil Smith-Rowe, hence why Aston Villa are going for him. The players that we want to move on that are surplus to requirements, you're going to struggle to find a Premier League club that's going to want to take them, bar maybe the likes of Eddie Nketiah to a Watford or a Brighton, etc. The only ones that you're going to see Granit Xhaka go off to are going to be the continent, Guendouzi to the continent, and those teams are very heavily affected by what's happened during the pandemic, and so therefore we're only going to get a really limited amount of money for them. And am I worried about seeing players like Guendouzi go for 8 million euros? The situation when you consider all of the factors, 1 year left on his deal, and the attitude problems that he had behind the scenes, the relationship with the man, no matter how you think about Arteta's management of him, the fact of the matter is that relationship is dead and that he has no future with the club. And so therefore the price is going to be affected by that. We've got Lucas Torreira coming out and saying that he wanted to go to Boca Juniors. Yes, the situation that he had to deal with was horrific. And I very thankfully I've not had to go through that situation yet in my life. And I can imagine that it is awful. But if you come out in an interview and say that you want to go to this specific team, your value is going to plummet, and that is going to affect the way that you are viewed in the market. And also, the last point on this is that Arsenal's history of selling poorly gives that perception that clubs can take advantage of Arsenal Football Club and can get a good deal for the players that they want. The same how Barcelona now, with their financial difficulties, are going to be taken advantage of by clubs bidding at low prices for some of their players because they know they have to sell. And that's what the big job that Edu has got this summer, is he's got to change the perception of how Arsenal sell. And that's why you're probably not seeing Roma get a very, very cheap price for Granit Xhaka at this stage in the window.
No, listen, I think you're spot on, mate. And I couldn't agree with you more in terms of what we've done in the past has had an effect on us now. People are saying, Granit Xhaka might be worth 25 million to some, but we're only going to offer you 15 million because we know that you sell players for cheap prices. So, Harry, I'll come to you. Before I do that, there's over 100 of you watching live, loads of people in the chat. Please smash the like buttons. If we get to 50 likes, Harry's going to shave his beard off. So let's get to 50. Harry, I'll come to you, man. Let's stick with the players that we think are going to go. We think there's going to be some activity. We've got to, in my opinion, sell before we buy. That's what I think is going to have to happen. And I think we'll see that now the Euros is over. There's a lot of players we have been linked with, but there's a lot of players that have been linked with moves out. What's your kind of opinion on our midfield? Because I've got to start with this. I'm worried, mate. We are going into this pre-season with Thomas Partey as the only player I rate in midfield. That's worrying. We've got a young kid, Aziz, that we've promoted. We've got Mohamed El Neni still there. We all know what he does. He just passes sideways and backwards as he's fine for cover as fourth or fifth choice, but he's not going to take us to glory. Granit Xhaka looks to be leaving and going to Roma, which I think is something you'll be disappointed to see. Obviously, we've got the likes of Torreira, Guendouzi, Ceballos now gone. what's going on in our midfield? Are we going to end up needing about 3 midfielders here or something, Harry? What's going on, mate?
I think that we at least need 2. One of them is going to be Lokonga by the looks of it, but I think we need someone experienced, a little bit more experienced and a little bit more ready, a little bit more polished maybe to come in and play alongside Thomas Partey. You said there that I'd probably be disappointed at Xhaka leaving. I actually agree that he's come to the end of his Arsenal career because because
I'm clipping it.
It doesn't really matter what Granit Xhaka does it? Last season proved that he was Arsenal's, in my opinion, most consistent performer over the course of the entire season. Yet everybody still wants him gone, and everybody refuses to appreciate what he actually does for the team. So at that point, as a player, I can understand why Granit Xhaka would want to leave, and I can understand why it feels like an uphill battle for the manager as well, because every time he picks this guy, he's going to get stick for it. So, I think that it is time for Granit Xhaka to move on, but that leaves a massive hole in this team, because in Granit Xhaka, you're talking about an experienced midfielder who went and showed at the Euros that he can do it at a very high level. That he's a leader, has a mistake in him from time to time, but and also the other big thing is that he's fit all the time. So how do you replace someone like that? You need to go out and spend top dollar. So if Arsenal go in and bring a ready-made central midfield player to play alongside Thomas Partey, in addition to Albert Lokonga, I'll be quite happy with that. Who it's going to be, we don't know yet. But there's still other positions, Dan, that need addressing. And least of all in that, that number 10 position is really important. So that's part of the midfield as well. So I still think that we probably need to get, if the Lokonga deal is done, which we think it is, I still think we need another 2 players in that midfield at minimum if we're going to compete, because it's a really important area. And, everybody's talking about bringing in another right back and maybe bringing in a striker. Even if we had to miss out on a number 10, that central midfield for me is the most important area that Mikel Arteta needs to address between now and the end of the window. It's so important.
I totally agree. And Tom, I'll come to you. He talks about transition, and Thomas Partey was brought in for transition. I don't think we saw the best of Thomas Partey last season. I actually am a big fan, and I think he's going to be a much better central midfielder this season. But, and it is a but, we need the right player next to him. I said to Clive Palmer not long ago, we were both having a chat about the midfield, and we were saying this is probably the weakest midfield it's been since before Arsene Wenger's time. Like, I honestly believe that. I think it's absolutely terrible. So, as much as I dislike Granit Xhaka and I want to see him go, Harry's got a point that he was probably our best midfielder last season. And as much as I don't think he's the right person moving forward, and we need to upgrade with someone with more movement and athleticism, if we are going to replace Granit Xhaka, he's got to be with the right body. I'm worried about our midfield, Tom. I don't think we've got much time to sort this out, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm equally as worried as you about the move. I think it's a case in point that when you look at the drop-off in quality from Thomas Partey to the next player, which at the moment is still Granit Xhaka, who I like Harry, have rated for a considerable amount of time, it's still a massive difference in quality. I don't think as you say, we saw the best from Partey last season. A lot of that was down to the injuries he got when he first came in, and trying to deal with a transition where you can't even play is very hard. Naturally, when he played in the second half of the season, in correlation, our form was brilliant in the league in the second half in comparison to the other sides in the table. So I don't think those two are not mutually exclusive. When it comes down, though, to the depth, you look at El Neni as the next best midfielder after Xhaka, and that's not good enough. Yeah. That's just not good enough. And when you look at the kind of the midfields of the other teams in the league and what they're doing to try and improve their midfields as well, it's such a stark contrast. And we've always said that the midfield for us is the weakest point. And bringing in one £50 million player was never going to transform it enough to make a real difference in terms of where we sit in the league table. The worrying things that keep coming out is Lokonga. I don't know if you heard or have read the story, but there was a Belgian outlet called Sport Magazine that have said that there was a consideration that there could be a loan for Lokonga this season, so he can transition.
Oh my God.
And I mean, I did a little bit of digging on this, and I text Sacha Tavolieri, who's a Belgian football expert and journalist, and he said that whilst he thinks those reports are very premature, he's going to be judged over the course of pre-season. When they go to Florida and they go on that trip, how he performs will then kind of give them an indication about where he is in his development as well, and how he transitions, or whether or not he does indeed need to leave on a loan. Whilst I would understand the theory behind sending a player on loan if they don't feel he's yet ready, what I wouldn't understand is understanding how poor the depth in our midfield is, that I don't think you can afford to sending him on loan even if you need him to, because he's shown enough quality in the Belgian league, and from what I've heard and now researched and seen about him, that he's good enough to get in above El Neni. He's got the leadership qualities as well from being captain at Anderlecht to play in this Arsenal team should he be called upon for rotation purposes, not as a starting player yet, but certainly to come in at times at the end of matches or for League Cup games or the odd midweek game if we need to rotate. He's good enough to do that immediately, but we need to be signing quality additions. And I've asked this several times, is we're being linked to the likes of Ruben Neves, etc., in that position. And like you, Dan, I don't think one is enough. I don't think one central midfielder is enough for us this summer. However, realistically, and we have no idea what the budget is, but the realism is that it probably will be one prime main signing with Lokonga that we do, because they need to bring in a right back, arguably. We need to get another goalkeeper. We need to get an attacking midfielder to replace what we've lost in Ødegaard going, and what we've lost in, obviously, Ozil's now left the squad, and Danny Sabas, who could play there, is also gone. So there is a gap there too. But I mean, I'll throw a question back to you, Dan. Can you foresee kind of players from within the youth section and players that are going to be getting minutes in the pre-season being promoted and filling some of those spots in the squad?
Yeah, I think they're going to have to, because I think there's too much to do. You look at the likes of Joe Willock, you look at the likes of Aziz being promoted, Balogun's coming through. There's a lot of talk about some of the other youngsters that I've not even heard of at the moment, Tom, that you probably have, that are going to be a part of the squad or a part of the pre-season. Arteta's looking, isn't he? He's looking and saying, right, I might need a couple of these lads here because I've got a few weeks left here and there's a lot for me to do. So it's their chance to shine. I know Hutchinson was one. Omar Hutchinson is a guy that apparently everyone's raving about. I don't know enough about him. They're talking about him being like the next Raheem Sterling. Of course, we've always got one that's going to be the next big thing. But I actually think there will be some that are going to be coming in and having to be used. And I do think some of them need to go. And I'm talking about the youngsters. I do think some of them, like Reece Nelson, I just don't think he's going to make it. I would sell Joe Willock personally and replace him with someone better. I would get rid of Eddie Nketiah. I don't know if you saw his one-on-one miss tonight. That was dreadful. I would get rid of him. I think Palace are interested in him. So there's a few that I would look to shift out, but we still got to replace those players. Yeah, exactly. We still need to replace those players. But let's come back to you, Harry. Like, before we start delving into rumours and positions that we need, what are you expecting at the moment as a whole from Arsenal this transfer window? Are you expecting loans and cheap spending, or are you expecting Kroenke to put his hand in his pocket?
No, I'm expecting Arsenal to actually spend some money. I am expecting the Ben White deal to get done. The Lokonga one is going to be around about, between 17 and 20 million pound by the time all the add-ons are in there as well. I think we will bring in another central midfielder, and I think we probably will bring in a number 10. I'm quite confident that Arsenal will spend this time around. I just hope that all the kind of rumours and reports that we've heard about what Arsenal are able to spend were not based on Arsenal bringing in big money for players going out, because that is not going to happen. And I think the longer this window is going on, that's becoming more and more evident. You're talking about players going out with clubs sort of going, well, yeah, we'll take this guy on loan for the season, and maybe we'll put an option to buy or an obligation to buy at the end of that contract, because these clubs simply don't have the money to put on the table right now. What Arsenal have been quite smart in doing, in the way they've done a couple of these deals, the Guendouzi one and the Mavropanos one, from what I am led to believe, is they've put clauses in there that turn the options to buy into obligations to buy when certain triggers are met. And those triggers, from what we're reading and hearing, are quite low. So it looks like those deals will turn into that. But it's about that little bit of back and forth now. Bellerin is a prime example now, Dan, of someone who wants to go. We probably want him to go. What do you do now as Arsenal Football Club? You've got a situation where he's made it clear he wants to join Inter. And people are harping on about Inter just selling Hakimi. Yeah, but they've done that because they needed the money. It doesn't mean they're going to go and spend 20 million now on Hector Bellerin. And we're in a position now where, as a club, you have to start being ruthless. Do you just say, let's just cut our losses with Hector Bellerin? He wants to go. He's been a good servant to the club. He's been at the club for many years. It's what he wants. We want him out. Let's just do it. Let's do something that maybe to the fans doesn't look as appealing. or do you really dig your heels in? I think if you dig your heels in, you're just going to end up with so many of these players on the books at the start of next season that you don't want. So the ruthlessness has to come into it, and the bad spending in the past continues to haunt us. And you've just got to hope that there is money from somewhere else, that there is money from the restructuring of the debt, that there is money from, maybe the Amazon documentary might buy us a defender. Who knows? You just got to see it that way and see.
It already has.
I mean, I must admit, I think this it shows you how bad this previous regime was, right? Look at some of these players that we can't get rid of. We're still playing Kolasinac tonight, yeah, because nobody wants him. He got Schalke relegated. He's on 125k a week. Nobody wants to pay him that. Bellerin, another player who I think has been poor for a couple of seasons now, particularly around his injury, which I thought he was pretty poor before that anyway, and this has just made him worse. I don't think Milan are going to sign him. I think we're going to be stuck with some of these players. I really do. And I think actually a right back, although we've been linked with 409 now, I actually think when you look at who I don't think we're actually going to get a right back. I actually think that's the last position we're going to try and look at, because we've got Bellerin, Chambers and Cedric that can all play there. So Chambers is fine for your West Ham, your Burnley, your Brighton type games. And then I reckon he'll use Cedric or Bellerin if he stays with us as our first choice right back still. I'll be amazed if we end up getting another right back at this rate, because I don't think we can sell these players. And then we've got Torreira coming back, who I'm not I like him. I don't mind Torreira. I don't think he's the answer, but I certainly would prefer him over somebody like Aziz being promoted, because at least he's got that experience and he's that little batter, or El Neni, exactly. So there's some problems, Tom, some big problems. But I want to talk about, people are bringing it up in the chat, so I'm going to bring it up now before we move on. Saliba, Tom. This is a player we bought back in 1996. This is a centre-back who we bought back in 1996, it seems, who still hasn't kicked a ball for Arsenal. We've had him for 3 years. The first year I understood, because if you believe the rumours, he requested to stay at St Etienne for this full season. Everyone was happy with that. He was only, I think, 18 years old at the time. Then it all went wrong for him, personally, apparently, the next season, with Arteta, who said, you know what, you go back to France. This season, without fail, he's just said, crack on and go back to France again, it seems. Now, I don't know the rumours as much as both you and Harry, and I don't know the full truth in it, so maybe I could learn something from this. But I find it very, very confusing now, Tom.
It's a very confusing situation, Dan. It's as simple as that. The thing about William Saliba is that my view on the situation isn't a particular popular one. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm saying that I'm right. It's an opinion at the end of the day. My view on it is that he's played 38 games in the league across 3 years. So he played 16 games in the season that we loaned him back to the season before he left Saint Etienne. The season that we loaned him back there, he played 12 league games because of injury and because the Liga being curtailed early because of the whole pandemic situation. And then he didn't play any games in the first half of last season, but he played 20 then consecutive-ish games of a couple of benches throughout the season at Nice. And so he's played 38 games in 3 years, which for a 20-year-old defender at the top level is just simply not enough. It's not enough games to really kind of build up enough momentum to say that, yes, categorically, you would be coming straight into the Arsenal first team and be smashing it. I'm not saying that he wouldn't. And I think that's something that people very quickly jump on, the fact is me saying that and saying, so you don't think he's good enough. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the likelihood based upon the experience that he's got across those 3 years indicates that it would be a huge risk to really put the emphasis on him being the guy that continues Arsenal's defensive form next season. Because from watching him at Nice, and I did a fair amount with the help of a lot of people like Jeremy Smith, who've watched him every single week, whilst he does feel that he feels like he should be given a chance by Arsenal, it's not perfect. Like, he was still raw. There are still elements of his game that he really needs to develop and improve upon. And maybe one more season, however painful it is for us to admit and how much we want to desperately see him in an Arsenal shirt, a full season of a full league playing as a team where he is going to play week in, week out would be the best thing. Now, that's the kind of the football side of things. To address the off-field stuff is a completely different situation, because there's, first of all, you got to think about the actual deal, how we signed him from Saint Etienne, and any alleged, and it's important to say alleged, stuff that's gone on with that deal, with how Raul Sanllehi has structured it and what kind of things have gone on behind the scenes. And we can only speculate about that sort of thing. But for me, I from what I've kind of like gleaned from the situation and from what we've kind of understood, is that it doesn't seem quite right. It doesn't seem right at all. for what's gone on there. The other thing is, of course, what he's done from his perspective, from a social standpoint, how he reacted to not being able to play in the French Cup final, from what I understand was not a great reaction, and the club and Arteta didn't take kindly to how he reacted to that either. How he reacted and acted during the period where he was in the under-23s. Apparently they didn't particularly weren't impressed by that. I understand him acting like that. You've been £28 million signing, you've been chucked in the under-23s. Of course you're going to be annoyed. But from the club's perspective, they haven't particularly reacted well to how he was. And then, of course, this year we have the whole video, and I don't need to go into details about what we saw during the video. So all of those things combined, and you've got a very unpredictable, and as you said when you asked the question, Dan, confusing situation, and maybe a loan away for one more year is the right decision. I mean, you'll go on to Harry, I'm sure, but for me, the destination is a big, big problem, and I would have loved to have seen him go to a Premier League team personally.
Yeah, and I would, and I'll come to Harry in a minute. But all I can think is that either Raul Sanllehi put something in his contract that said, if he kicks a ball for Arsenal in the Premier League, you owe £100 million to the club. Or he had such a dreadful game against MK Dons, which I actually watched and thought he was all right, by the way, that he didn't fancy him. Harry, what's your opinion on this before we move on, man? Are you frustrated as everyone else, or are you accepting it, or what's going on?
I don't actually think it's that strange for a manager to come into a club and decide a player that he had nothing to do with signing is not the right man for what he wants to do at this moment in time. I think that had William Saliba not cost Arsenal 27, 28 million pounds, he'd have been sold on by now. I honestly believe that. I think I get it. Like, I get why people are disappointed. He came with a big reputation and people sort of were excited about it, and they thought after that first year at St Etienne that he was going to come and start establishing himself as a first teamer at Arsenal. But I find the whole sort of noise around this quite strange, because Tom's mentioned that he's spoken to people that have been, watching him, and I listen to those people and I take those people's opinions on board. But I can guarantee you the majority of Arsenal fans that are up in arms about William Saliba have not watched Nice play for 90 minutes, probably not even once over the course of the season. And therefore, it's impossible to have an informed opinion on whether he's good enough to slot into the Arsenal side. Tom mentioned as well, and absolutely spot on, there's a lot of sort of speculation about that deal, how that deal came about. Maybe we did overpay for him. But all I'm saying is a manager now that we have, and rightly or wrongly, that the club have trusted, should not be held over a barrel and forced to include somebody that he doesn't feel is right just because the club maybe overpaid for him in the past. All the things about his attitude, in my opinion, are probably bigger factors than his actual ability. I think Mikel Arteta has made it very clear since he took the job that he's not going to put up with stuff like that. And, there is speculation that there's been a few incidents now on which the pair haven't seen eye to eye. The only kind of part of me that feels a little bit sorry for Saliba right now is is what happened to him last season. I thought that was completely mishandled to not be able to arrange a loan deal for him and essentially have him sitting on the sidelines and being excluded for the first part of the season was criminal. That's the one thing I would say that Arsenal have absolutely got wrong with William Saliba. But the rest of it, I'm not even sure I completely agree with it, but I can understand it. And I'm not necessarily as angry and irate about it as some are. And for those reasons.
No, fair play. What better way to send somebody who they believe needs to mature to go and play with Matteo Guendouzi at Marseille? I'm sure they will get on swimmingly well. It'll be interesting, though, won't it, to see how they both get on, because I imagine they're both going to play first-team football. I don't know what positions. Tom may know more than me, but Marseille's team I'm not too sure about. But I imagine Guendouzi and Saliba would walk straight into it. So I think they'll probably play first-team football. It will be very interesting to see what happens. Boys, I'm going to talk quickly before we wrap up about some positions that I think we're looking at. I've put together the Arsenal first team, and I've only selected the players that I think are 100% going to start. So it'll be interesting to see if you agree with me on this one or not. There's going to be some positions that we're going to discuss, and I'm sure it's quite obvious to see what is going to be happening in certain areas of the side. But I want to share this because I feel like this here is personally 4 positions maybe that we can look to get better at. So obviously Leno, looks to be the goalkeeper. There's a lot of talk about him maybe not staying at Arsenal, but we're looking at Leno. We're looking at Gabriel being the first left choice centre back, Kieran Tierney at left back, Thomas Partey in the middle, Pepe, Aubameyang and Saka. Maybe you may disagree and think Martinelli might get the nod, or maybe Smith Rowe being there, Lacazette even. But I think personally it will be something like that. We're looking at these 4 positions now: centre back, right back, a partner for Partey, and a number 10 position. Tom, I'll start with you. Like, have I got that about right there? Do you think there's anyone I've missed out that you think, oh no chance of him playing, or is that pretty much spot on for a first 11? Do you think?
Yeah, I think that the only discrepancy for I think people will say is Leno. That's really the only one that a lot of people might think to change. Gabriel, as we know, started off really well, had a bit of a tail off. Tierney is arguably the best player in the squad at times. Partey, we know is gonna play. The only thing I'd change on here is the positions of Pepe and Saka. I personally would like to see Pepe really given an opportunity to run a right wing position, and Saka to be kind of the creator on the left hand side for Aubameyang getting those crosses in. But what frustrates me is when we talk about kind of positions that we know that we need to go for. But it's also the fact that we were told by Edu and Arteta in press conferences that they have a plan. And I know we've talked a lot about kind of how difficult it is at this early stage. Now there are other clubs in the table that necessarily haven't done loads of business so far. But a lot of those clubs don't need to do loads of business. We kind of do. And when you compare it to say how much is going on and where we're now already in pre-season and the first game is a month away, and how long it's taken to get some of these deals done, I'm concerned. I am concerned now. I wasn't about 2-3 weeks ago, but I am concerned at this point. I'm not panicking yet. There is just a bit of concern on my mind when I think about the first game of the season against Brentford, and then we've got Chelsea and Man City after that, and all of a sudden it becomes very difficult to see where we're going to get points from if you don't improve those positions that you've highlighted. We seem to think that Ben White's going to be that guy coming into that right centre-back slot. I have no idea who we're getting at right back. Absolutely no idea whatsoever. I mean, we would have been linked to a few players like Aarons and Zeki Celik and Maltmadur from Sassuolo, who I've probably murdered the pronunciation of. But in terms of...
Better than me, mate. Better than me. I'd have no chance.
Yeah. I give it my best shot. I really do. I can't match Harry's Mavropanos.
If a Greek can't say it right, what hope does anyone else have?
Of course. I'm just trying to get tips from Sophie about saying as many as I can. But then midfield, it looks like Ruben Neves. I would probably bet on him being the guy that Arsenal end up getting in the midfield. Is that a good enough replacement for Granit Xhaka? I think he's good in certain areas. I think he's not as good at passing, but progressively in terms of him on the ball is better, and he'll get us out of some tough situations with his technical ability and maybe give us a goal from long range. But I wouldn't describe him as a goal-scoring midfielder by any chance. And you've got to think about some of the players like Willock. If he's going to stay and get into that team, is he going to keep the form that he had for Newcastle? If he does, great. You've also got to look at the formation that you use, Dan, because I think there's also a chance that maybe there's 2 formations that we choose to go for. One being a 4-3-3 with kind of the number 6 behind 2 number 8s, and in which case Willock's perfect for that formation with the security of a number 6 behind him. And the others possibly even a back 3, because Ben White's typically played with a back 3 with Brighton. And we've got players that I think we can play at wing back like maybe Tierney, but more so I like Saka in a left wing back role. I think it works. A lot of people don't really like him, prefer him further up. I like him with, say, Smith Rowe on the left hand side ahead of him to give him that kind of inversion. And then it's who plays at right wing back, which is a trickier question. But I think there's a lot to do, as you've seen from my monologue there. But there's a lot to do in a short space of time that's growing ever smaller by the day.
Yeah, it really is. And in a couple of weeks, if we're in this position, I will certainly start to worry. There's 200 of you watching live. Please hit the like button if you can. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Harry, let's come to you quickly. Those positions there that I've highlighted. Listen, I'm going to give some credit now, believe it or not, to Mikel Arteta and to Edu, right? Because I actually think the only positive is what...
Screen recording this.
You know what it is, though? I actually feel... the only positive, and I mean the only positive, off the field, I feel like they have got more right than wrong. I think they've got some wrongs in Runnison, Willian, Ceballos. But I actually feel like they've got some good signings in. I'm a big fan of Gabriel and I'm a big fan of Partey. Do you have the confidence, Harry, with the links so far? Because we have been linked with those positions that I've kept kind of invisible at the moment. We have been linked with those. Do you have the confidence that we're going to get those 4 positions filled for the first team? Or have you still got doubts?
I've obviously got some doubts, but, I I tend to agree with you on that. I think for me, I think they probably did have a plan. I've got to be honest. But a plan means nothing if you can't execute it. And, you can sit there with a blank piece of paper during the course of the season and jot down a load of names for positions that you want. And, but the reality is you have to bloody get those deals done. And sometimes you can't get those deals done. And then what ends up happening is you go from option A down to option B, and then you find option B is not realistic and you move to option C. And all of a sudden you had a plan, but you've ended up buying your third choice centre midfielder, your second choice number 10, and your fourth choice right back. And that's the problem that Arsenal have had for many seasons now. Well, no, that's probably unfair. I'm not going to say for many seasons. I'm going to say since maybe Mikel Arteta's come in. He's come in at a difficult period because he has come in when Arsenal were in a position without Champions League football. Once you fall out of that, it is much harder to get back into it. The financial situation of the club becomes very different. All of a sudden, Mikel Arteta arrives and he's got a Champions League wage budget, but he's got a Europa League budget in which to operate, which obviously eats into the funds that the club have available. And this is not me making excuses for him, but I do look at Mikel Arteta and listen to him talk and feel genuinely that he knows what he's doing and where he wants to go, that there is a clear idea and a clear direction in his mind. But is he going to be able to get there with the tools available to him? That's my big worry and my big concern. And this summer's going to be massive, because if he doesn't get it right in the transfer market and then subsequently right in the first 3-4 months of next season, the pressure's going to be on. And I don't think even the most ardent of Arteta fans could defend him if things don't improve and he's sacked at that point. You'd have to accept it and say it's probably fair. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't recognize that this is a really, really tough job at the moment. What was interesting about Nuno Tavares' interview the other day, I don't know if you guys saw it, was that he said that he knew about the contact from Arsenal months ago, which suggests to me that the signing of Nuno Tavares was not we're discussing Matteo Guendouzi, and in the midst of that, we found out he's available. Let's do it, like some people were suggesting. So that gives me a little bit more faith that there is a plan. But again, as I say, what's a plan if you can't execute it?
Absolutely. And this is the example I used the other day with Lee Judges. And I said to Lee, look, I could pretend to be able to fit you a wet room with the best shower and the best gadgets going, and I can talk you through it, and you might think, wow, that sounds fantastic. But trust me, if I put that shower in and that wet room in, you're going to have some leaks, boy. Trust me, because I'm not a plumber. So I've got to convince you that you need a new wet room, and I could do it. But can I put one in? Absolutely no chance. And that's the only analogy I can put forward towards Mikel Arteta, because he's proven to me for 2 seasons that he cannot execute it on the pitch. But off the pitch, he's getting some players in that I like. I like Gabriel. I quite like Pablo Mari. I quite like Thomas Partey. So I like some of the stuff he's done with and Edu as well has to be involved with some of the long-term contracts that Saka, Martinelli, and we hope Smith Rowe's getting. Balogun, another one. So in the next couple of years, we're hopefully going to see a young crop of players coming through that we could say, do you know what? They're some of the best in the league here. So that is the positives for me. Tom, I'll come to you on this one because I filled in the gaps. So I want to say, first of all, that I do not think this is going to be the first team, but I'm just putting who I believe we are being linked with this team, because we're linked with everybody. But if you believe it, then this is who we are being linked with. Oh, it's not done it. Wrong one. Let's stop sharing that. But
what happens when Judges in there?
Don't trust me. He will not be able to do this. No, it's not going to let me do it for some reason. I don't know why.
Just tell us who are in the positions.
So the people in the positions that I'm looking at is different to you. So I've basically gone for Aaron's at right back, Ben White at centre back, Neves next to Partey, and Maddison in the 10. Now, I know that may be unrealistic. Obviously, we're linked with Husam Aouar as well. But let's just look at that for a second, because obviously a right back cover might not be Max Aaron's. I'm still not even sure we're going to get a right back, if I'm honest with you. I think we might not be able to. However, when I look at it, I think James Maddison, there's clearly something there. Whether it's realistic or not with Leicester, I'm not sure, because he's going to be a lot of money. But there's clearly something there, because it won't go away. Ruben Neves, likewise, it won't go away. Houssam Aouar, I think, is realistic, and we nearly got him last summer. I think that is potential. It won't go away. Lokonga and Tavares look to be done. Ben White, very, very heavily linked. They said as soon as the Euros is done, it's pretty much going to be announced. That would be an exciting summer, Tom, would it? Question mark. If we got those players in?
If you told me that we got the only other one I think is backup goalkeeper. It is a big one. But if you told me that we were getting Madison Neves, Aarons, White, Lokonga, Tavares, I'm trying to think of anyone else that I've missed. I don't think so. That's probably the best summer of the last decade. I'm trying to think of a better summer than that. That's an incredible amount of talent being brought in.
Is it realistic? Is it realistic?
Well, that's always going to be the next question. I don't think it is, bro. Of course. I don't think that 7 signings is unrealistic. It's more like the level and how many of those 7 are starters and genuine upgrades on what we've already got. I think that's the question you have to ask about realism. 7 signings, I think, is more than realistic. It's about the quality of those 7 signings and how many of them do upgrade upon the positions that we already have. But to be honest, even say if Arsenal managed to get that team right, and you see the Madison's in there, you've got Smith Rowe that we haven't even talked about really as well, that could arguably be starting and could even turn out and develop into a better player than James Maddison one day. Who knows? But for me, the difference between Arsenal achieving what we want to be their target, which, if we're honest, is probably top 4, which is a really difficult, really difficult achievement when you think about how good Chelsea, Liverpool, United, City are, and that doesn't even factor in your Leicesters, etc. So the difference between Arsenal and them is the quality of the squad, not the quality of the first 11. And that's where Arsenal are falling down. And when we have injuries, or we have the African Cup of Nations next season, when we have these periods where we're going to be without some of those key starters, it's who comes in for them? Who fills in those gaps? Do we have the depth in place to be able to cope with that? We didn't last season. We didn't have a number 10. Mesut Ozil wasn't included in the squad. We didn't sign one. Emile Smith-Rowe was injured at the start of the season and gradually brought in, and eventually on Boxing Day he did. And we transformed our league form after that point. And so if we are able to put this team together that you've got on the screen now, yes, I think it's good enough if you said everyone stayed fit to compete for a top 4 place. And I mean compete, I don't mean make a top 4 place, but to compete for one if everyone stays fit, I think that's a very good first 11. But do we have the squad to compete for a top 4 finish? That's where I would have some very serious questions.
Well, I think when you look at this here, I've managed to get this up now. Lee just run me and told me how to do it. No, I'm joking. We look at this situation. And I think, you know what, that first 11, albeit I think particularly unrealistic in a couple of positions, maybe right back in number 10. If you believe that we have got the likes of Smith Rowe still to come in, we've got the likes of Martinelli here on the bench.
It's brave.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean. Houssam Aouar, Balogun, all of these on the subs bench here. You're actually thinking that's some serious pace coming into this side. That's some serious young, athletic, vibrant players coming into this side. So I'm okay with that. How realistic is this? I'm still not so sure. But that team there, I'll come to you, Harry, as a first 11, you've got to be saying that should be competing with 3rd or 4th place. Or is that too optimistic?
I'm not sure. I've got to be honest. I'm not sure. I mean, I like Ben White. I like the idea of signing Ben White, but you know, is he at this moment in time a top centre half? I'm not sure. And Gabriel's still, for me, as good as he looked at certain points last season, still a bit raw. Still has a long way to go. You look at the midfield, Neves, I think, is a good player. I'm not sure how much better he is than Granit Xhaka, if I'm being completely honest. Maddison, I like. I don't know. I think that, as Tom said, I think competing for the top 4 is all I want to see from Arsenal this season. And that's me being realistic. Because you look at the teams that are going to be in it, right? Your Manchester Cities, your Liverpools, your Chelseas, your Manchester Uniteds. These sides are still better than that side, in my opinion. And so how do you bridge the gap? You know, it's going to be really difficult. You kind of got to hope that one of them has a stinker of a season if you're going to sneak in there. And then you've got the teams around that. You've got the Tottenhams, the Leicesters, who will be competing with us as well. So I think it's going to be really difficult. I don't think it's as simple as saying if we get those players, we'll be in the top 4. I think it's down to a lot of things. Can you keep everybody fit? Are you going to get the rub of the green from time to time? Which, let's be honest, we had a bad season last year, but we certainly didn't have to rubber the green. We had so many bad decisions go against us that proved decisive. I worry that getting into the top 4 straight away is going to be too big a task. It's not what I want, obviously, but it feels like if we can at least compete until the sort of last couple of months of the season or the last few weeks of the season, hopefully, then that would be a step in the right direction for me.
Just quickly, Dan, before you cut in,
on,
in the chat for Raydun Ate in the chat has said you guys are doing the show on a hypothetical basis, and I see this comment comes up quite a lot, and it's like about predictions and that we're saying stuff that we think is going to happen, but I struggle to think what the alternative is at this stage in pre-season.
Kind of the idea, yeah.
I struggle to. That's what I'm saying is that you have to. It's really difficult, especially based off like a pre-season game that we've all just witnessed and bored ourselves to death watching. And
it was shit, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was awful. I mean, some people have paid, including myself, money to watch that, which is incredibly annoying. And in terms of where we're at, we can only hypothesize about what the team might look like and how we might compete. But what sometimes frustrates me about when I join in, and not just any other show, Dan, but my show as well, and I get so frustrated with some of the chatbots, is that the level of pessimism at this early stage, and we genuinely don't know what we're going to do in the market. We don't know how we're going to shape up next season. There is no point losing our minds on the 13th of July after a first pre-season loss. We just need to be a little bit more grounded and really try and think about what we've got still to go before the start of the season and what, of course, still can happen.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair point. And in relation to the comment, look, everyone's entitled. They can throw anything up in the chat, absolutely, as long as it's appropriate. But I kind of think that is the idea. We're talking about what we're linked with. All of the players I put up there. Do I think that's going to be our first 11? Absolutely not. But they're the players we're linked with. So the idea of it is to sit there and say, do you know what? If we do get these players in, are we looking at top 4? And you're both sort of saying maybe not even that's enough. So I think it's going to be a struggle. Before we kind of look to wrap this up, Tom, I'll come to you first. Mikel Arteta, I think there's a lot of excuses that have come his way, but I don't think he's got many left this season.
Yeah.
How long are we giving him until we start to ask questions about should he be sacked or not? Give me a month. Next season.
It's tough because I think next season is a real opportunity for Arsenal without European football to really press domestically. And I feel like if it's not working at an early stage and say we're already falling off the pace, and I mean genuinely like less than a couple of months in, you have to start really kind of questioning whether the right time, because some people said let it go to Christmas. It's too late. It's far too late by that point. And then you're at the race. So yeah, I'm saying he's under pressure from day one for me. But I think a couple of months, if we're like 6, maybe more than 6 points off top 4, then I think you've got to have a big question.
And what's a good season for Arteta or Arsenal? And what's a great season? I'll ask you that before I move to Harry.
Good season's top 6. Great season's top 4. That's for me.
Okay. That's pretty simple. Harry, same stuff to you, man. How long are you giving Arteta this season, and what's a good season and a great season look like?
I agree with Tom on what a good and great season looks like. I think he's absolutely spot on. In terms of how long would I give him, it's tough, man, because you've got to be sensible in the way you analyze what it is that we're doing. You know, we're going to come up against some really difficult teams in the opening weeks, and you can bet your bottom dollar that if Arsenal lose a couple of those early games, let's say against Chelsea and Manchester City, people are going to be saying Arteta out, Arteta out. For me, those are two sides that are better than us. They're 2 Champions League finalists, and therefore I'm going to look at it as, did I see improvements in the performance? How did we lose? And I'm going to base it on what I'm seeing overall. And I think I just kind of urge everybody to be a little bit less reactionary in that sense, because
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I know. It's just mad, isn't it? You know that if we lose a couple of our opening fixtures, that'll be that, and the noise will be too loud. And I'm just hoping the club are able to, just block it out and do what they think is the right thing, and do what is the right thing ultimately, not what they think is. And that is give him a fair chance to get it right this season. And if after 3-4 months into the season you're not seeing any improvement, then you can pull the trigger. I'll be the first one to say it at that point. But you can't go into the first 3-4 games saying he has to win 3 of his first 4 or he's out. That's just mad.
I like this from Mark. Dan, 2 days. Tom, 2 months. Harry, 2 years. Excellent. I'm going to give him the first 6. I'm only giving him the first 6. Listen, I wanted this guy sacked back in 2020, so I'm giving him the first 6 games, and I don't care that we've got Chelsea, City,
I
and
thought
Spurs
you meant
in those
months.
first 6.
I was like, Jesus, you're optimistic,
mate.
Dan. Jesus.
No way, no way. I'm giving him 6 games, and if we don't take 9 off of Brentford, Norwich, and Burnley, then yeah, I don't want him anymore. So I don't care what we do in the summer. We will sign players. We will, and we need to make sure that we are as in the best position personally as we can on paper at finishing as high as we can up the league. And that's the way it is. Yes, I agree with Harry. Manchester City, Liverpool are going to come back. Chelsea are going to push for the title, especially if they do get the players they're linked with. Manchester United have got Bruno Fernandes and they've just signed Sancho, and it looks like they're getting Varane. So they're going to be very, very difficult as well. So, of course, top 4, there's your top 4 right there. But I want us to be in that mix with Manchester United. I want us to be looking down at Leicester, Spurs, West Ham, Villa, Everton. I'm not looking up at them down with Newcastle and Burnley. Arteta's going if that's happening as far as I'm concerned. So we need to be ruthless now. And if he is going to get backed in this summer, then he hasn't got any excuses for me. Boys, it's been a pleasure. Harry, how can everyone find you, mate? Thanks for coming on, bro.
Thank you for having me, man. You can find me on Twitter at Harry Symeou, and you can find me on the Chronicles of a Gooner on YouTube and on all podcast platforms.
Great stuff. Get yourself over there to Chronicles and subscribe, people, and follow Harry on Twitter and Instagram. Tom, thanks for coming on, bro. How can people find you, mate?
Absolute pleasure, Dan. Really appreciate you asking. Yeah, you can find us at the Gooner Talk TV, the Gooner Talk on YouTube every morning at 8 a.m. Tiredly covering transfers. Yeah.
Good stuff, mate. Thanks for coming on, bro. And everyone in the chat, thank you so much. Over 250 of you watching live. Great interaction. Sorry that I couldn't put all your comments up. I just could not keep up with it. But absolute pleasure having the boys on. Please go and follow them on Twitter. Please go and subscribe to their channels and support the lads. 2 massive Gooners, very knowledgeable. Don't always agree with, but I do like watching their content. Guys in the chat, thank you very much. You take care. We'll be probably back in the next couple of days with something different for you. And Lee will, of course, be back. Until then, we'll see you next time, and up the Arsenal.